Did Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey prove that they're MVPs of the 2023 fantasy football season? And what about James Cook's heater? And what about the Cowboys and Falcons letting us down big time? It's time to break down our Week 15 Saturday and Sunday reactions as we begin another week and another edition of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. We're your destination to become the smartest fantasy football player in your league. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your fantasy football team every day as well. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer, and when I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Hey, I'm Michelle Magdziuk, researcher at NFL Network and fantasy analyst for NFL.com.
All right, Michelle, I don't know what to make of this fantasy football opening playoff weekend. It was crazy. There were some just duds from a lot of notable players, especially at running back. Then you had some surprise big games. And then you had some guys that have been consistent for us just tanking, and then some guys that were hot and they just stayed hot and kept producing for us. So a lot to unpack here. Let's dive into it here in a moment. Before we do that, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, Michelle, let's dive right in. Let's start with the positive notes, right? Let's go there. Now, there's a big debate going on. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey. I don't think it's Dak Prescott anymore, I'm sorry to say. Who's the NFL MVP? But I have to say, Brock Purdy has got to be up there because he was not really thought about as a QB1 at all, taken late in drafts here. He's just rocking it every week. He's just on an absolute heater here of late. And then Christian McCaffrey explodes here with a big game against the Cardinals. We knew this matchup was great, but did we expect this explosion from these two guys in particular?
Listen, they're both fantasy MVPs, right? We'll figure out who wins NFL MVP a little bit later in the month or a couple months from now. But Brock Purdy doing what he's been doing with how late he was drafted in fantasy, and a lot of that had to do with the big scare from his elbow, right? He was coming off elbow surgery. We had no idea what he was going to look like, but we also had no idea he was going to turn into this in his second season. But he's the quarterback 4 on the season in points per game, and he's also the quarterback 2 in fantasy points per game since week 10. So he's got hot at the perfect moment, 21 plus points in 5 of the last 6 weeks. He does have a hard matchup against the Ravens next week, but it's at home and I'm not worried about it. And then you get the Commanders in the championship week. Like CMC also, I would even count him as a candidate for fantasy MVP, right? Like I know he was the 101 or 102, maybe 103 at the latest, but he's scoring the most points per game out of all positions, like more than any other quarterback, more than any other wide receiver. He has it's been so consistent for him. He's been absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and you look at this 49ers offense, you know what you're going to get, right? It's going to be Brock Purdy throwing pretty much your friend, trying to figure out Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, who's going to have the bigger game, who's going to get in the end zone, who's going to make the big enough plays here. And if you have some of these other guys, you don't want McCaffrey to dominate so much, right? You just want a little bit of love spread, but sometimes these games happen, right? I mean, McCaffrey is the man and he scores almost in every week. Yeah, I mean, if you unfortunately took Justin Jefferson at number 1 instead of Christian McCaffrey, you're not liking it right now, and you're probably not playing really deep into the playoffs. But yeah, McCaffrey's been awesome. Brock Purdy's been great. I think what happened was the perception of Purdy changed, right? Everyone just looked at him, okay, he's going to get 250 and 2 every week in this offense. McCaffrey's just going to run over people. But what do? They got aggressive. They realized how good Brock Purdy was at throwing the deep ball. They're throwing deep balls even when they're up big in games, right? He's just having fun out there. Like George Kittle is breaking free. I'm going to throw to him. Deebo Samuel, I'm going to just dump a short pass. Now, people have gotten on all these advanced metrics with A-dot, and sure, he throws some short passes, but he's accurate with them, but he's also a great deep ball passer.
Yep.
So he's executing. So stop. Just enjoy it. And this guy's going to be around for a while. It just reminds me of a guy that just burst on the scene, but he's not going to go away. I mean, as long as they kind of keep some of this intact, and I know his contract is going to change things a couple years down the line where they can't afford to keep all these weapons. But this system, as long as he's attached to Kyle Shanahan and some of the people around him, he's going to produce. So next year, I could see him going to the top 3 among quarterbacks. Like he's going to be
He'll
right
probably
up
go
there.
too early next year will
Yeah.
be the difficult thing. He's such a value right now because of how late you got him. But another quarterback who finally went off, it's been a long time, was Jared
Yeah.
Goff. He decided to
Yeah.
put up a 5-touchdown performance. Great for anyone who had to play him, right? But I mean, it was like a month ago since we last saw him have a good fantasy week. So it was scary to start him this week. Sam LaPorta has 3 receiving touchdowns, but like Jahmyr Gibbs, still, he has 2 touchdowns, over 100 scrimmage yards. The one player you would be disappointed in is David Montgomery if you started him. Had 85 rushing yards, but no touchdowns, really nothing in the receiving game. So Amon-Ra, amazing. Goff, amazing. Sam LaPorta, amazing. Now they get the Vikings at Minnesota. It is a dome game, but the Vikings have like turned into a pretty stingy defense. Are you going to trust what they did in this week and for that to carry on to next week against a divisional opponent?
Well, I wrote it when I was making my picks. I had the Lions as the lock here to win because I like the matchup so much. Because what do the Lions like to do? Throw to the tight end. Broncos can't cover tight end. What do the Lions like to do? Run the ball. They can't do it. And those two things came to fruition, right? Sam LaPorta, crazy season. He leads the NFL among tight ends with 9 touchdowns now, which is crazy. What a year for him. He's been in the conversation. He would be definitely on that all-pro team, right, in fantasy if he's not the MVP. And conversation for maybe offensive rookie of the year just based on him being on the field, right, and playing every game. So something to look at. If he didn't get it, you definitely look at C.J. Stroud and tank down Puka Nacua, but maybe we have to think a little bit more about his teammate Jahmyr Gibbs. And remember the season I said Jahmyr Gibbs was a better value pick than Bijan Robinson? Yeah, this is what's happened because he's on a team that knows how to use him. It took a little bit of time, right, to work him in there. But once they got comfortable, they said, look, he's just going to explode everywhere. We have great blocking. People have to worry about our passing game. So, look, David Montgomery didn't do anything here because, look, they didn't need him. I mean, if he gets one of those touchdowns that went through the air that Goff threw in different directions, then you're good, right, with Montgomery. And that's what we expected. So it's going to happen at some point, the touchdown regression with some of these backs if you're kind of dependent on that. But look, Montgomery was okay, but I think definitely this was a Gibbs game. Now, Baker Mayfield, we talk about Rachaad White, another guy that started out as, what are we doing here? Is he going to ever explode? And this guy's been an elite fantasy back as an RB1, so he keeps chugging along here. Chris Godwin, I didn't understand this one at all, Michelle. He's had a very quiet year. Then he explodes against Green Bay. I guess Green Bay stopped playing pass defense the past few weeks. I don't know what's going on, but Baker Mayfield just looked fantastic spreading the ball around. I don't know. It seems like it's a good environment. They get the Jaguars this week. Are you continuing to kind of roll out the members of that Bucs passing game?
So this is what's super irritating, right? Like I was in
Yeah.
I had to play against Baker Mayfield in my playoffs.
Oh, boy.
Why? Because Justin Herbert got hurt. So the guy had to pick up someone off waivers and he just happened to play Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield just happened to have a career high fantasy day. You can tell I'm pretty annoyed by that, but he does have back-to-back games now with 3 or more touchdowns, back-to-back games with 20 plus fantasy points. Like you just mentioned, they play the Jaguars. That's a nice matchup. And it does seem like with Chris Godwin, they have made it a priority to get him targets. Since week 13, he had 0 receptions, 0 yards. They did come out and say, we need to get Godwin more involved because clearly they're like, whoopsie, that's not a good game plan. After that, 11 targets in week 14. That turned into just 5 receptions, 53 yards. And then we saw 12 targets this yesterday, and it turned into a ton of receptions and yards. So I do think it is a priority for this team to get Godwin targets, and it actually turned into receiving yards. So I do think like next week, he'll probably have 10 targets again. It just depends on how efficient he is with that workload.
Yeah, this is a reminder to all of us, like, let's examine the system, right? I mean, this system was very good, right? Came from Seattle, and we know what Seattle did last year with Dave Canales there and what happened. And look, we were like, oh, Baker Mayfield, we're going to fade Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And Godwin has been up and down. He's been a borderline wide receiver 3 all year. This is kind of puts him into that top 36 range, right, with this type of game. But you look at the sustainability of Rachaad White, this offensive line has been pretty good. So You have to hand it to the Bucs. I mean, we were all down on them without Tom Brady, but in some ways, I think their offense has more assets that work without Tom Brady than it did last year, which is crazy to think. And they also might end up with a better record. So this is insane, but this is the season it's been. And look, systems sometimes work, and we've seen that with backup quarterbacks as well. If they execute within the system, fantasy numbers can be had. So we'll get into that. And Brock Purdy, of course, is the elite, super elite example of system and player, as well as McCaffrey marrying that. So we'll get into some more positive offenses before we finally get the negative vibes out of our system here from the disappointing from week 15. But before that, we got to hear more from LinkedIn Jobs. As we said at the top, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. And when you're hiring for a small business, it's like putting together a team in the NFL. You want to have as many top-tier candidates, the right makeup of employees, and you want to have the best pool to dive in, possibly an interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. You want to have that good chemistry, so you want to have the perfect fit there. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy that, in fact, 86% of small business get a qualified candidate within 24 hours to use in LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire effectively. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, a process intuitive, quick, and easy for you. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. So find your next great candidate, post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, we will get into more positive performances and reactions here from what happened on Saturday and Sunday here in week 15 in the fantasy football playoffs. Before we do that, a programming reminder for you to check out that Locked On has launched the lasting national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. Local experts of Locked On Plus or national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Michelle, another team we got to talk about here, the Rams. Look, they came through, right? We were touting this matchup, and we said, please don't botch it, right? We have to talk about the other side as well. That was a disaster. But Cooper Kupp, he's back being Cooper Kupp. We were worried about it for a few games, but 2 games in a row explodes. Kyren Williams looked great in this one. Matthew Stafford was pretty solid. Demarcus Robinson, our deep shot, played. Now, it was a quiet game for Puka Nacua, but again, if you have that many people going off and scoring and you don't get a lot of resistance, we didn't get anything really from the Commanders until garbage time late from Jacoby Brissett. I think we can take it, right? That's exactly what we're looking for. And we got to feel great about Sean McVay this season as well.
Yeah, the Rams are looking like they might actually be a playoff team this year, which is crazy with the way their season started. But I mean, Stafford didn't do exactly what we wanted, right? 2 touchdowns, 258 passing yards, but it was plenty enough. He didn't hurt you. He had like 18.5 fantasy points in a 4-point pass touchdown league. You will take that. Again, like you said, Cooper Kupp is getting targets and is actually turning into receiving yards and those touchdowns, a touchdown in each of the last 3 weeks. So he's back into play every week. And Kyren Williams is just a beast. Like, I don't get it. I don't get why he's so
he's
good.
Small
but
too.
he's a running back 2 in fantasy points per game this year, only behind Christian McCaffrey. Now, it's a huge gap, but still, he's scoring more than any other running back not named CMC. And he's just been extremely, extremely consistent. Now, one thing to keep an eye on with Demarcus Robinson is Tutu Atwell is expected back this week. That could mess with his time. So I probably wouldn't get cute and keep playing him. He had 3 targets, 2 receptions, 44 yards. He came down with a touchdown, but I want to get cute, keep playing him with Tutu back. But, with Stafford and Kupp, Kyren Williams, and even Puka, just keep playing them. They get the Saints next week, but it is at home, a little bit tougher of a matchup, but the Saints are so inconsistent on defense.
Yeah, they've had some injuries as well, and they're vulnerable to slots, so that's good for Kupp. Nakua. This is also potentially a higher scoring game, right? It's on Thursday night. It's a little bit of high total. There's a little bit of wild card implications here. I mean, these are the teams back to back 7 and 8 in the NFC. So this is going to be a rather competitive game. Let's hope it's a little bit more competitive than the Commanders. We'll save the Commanders. Oh gosh, until the last segment. What a frustrating team all season long, but they were even more frustrating. So let's stick to the other side of the Beltway. Lamar Jackson, look, the Jaguars, I don't know what was going on. They couldn't stop the run all of a sudden. Unfortunately, Keaton Mitchell goes down with a season-ending knee injury here in this game, but they ran all over them with Gus Edwards, with Mitchell, and Lamar. And then Lamar, that awesome play, scrambled around, throws a ball to Isaiah Likely downfield. So Lamar looks really good. I can't wait, Michelle, for this game coming up. It's going to be our Christmas gift of the week. Ravens, 49ers. Please go nuts, everyone, in this one next week.
Yeah, I'm a little bit scared about Lamar Jackson coming up in that 49ers game.
Okay.
We really thought the wide receivers in this matchup would do way better, right? Bateman ended up leading the wide receivers with OBJ. Zay Flowers doing almost nothing. Keaton Mitchell was looking so good. I feel really bad for him. It's officially tore his ACL and will be out for the rest of the year. Gus Edwards, though, now becomes a guy that you can really trust that he's going to get that work. And the 49ers were allowing James Conner to, do whatever he wanted last week. So I think Gus Edwards becomes a solid play for the next 2 weeks of our fantasy season. Isaiah Likely's killing it with Mark Andrews there. But yeah, it's nice to see Lamar finally running again. And that's what we need for fantasy. So it wasn't a huge week for him, but those 97 rushing yards really helped him not, kill you in your lineups. And then moving on to the Bills, talk about a running game. James Cook continues to kill it. I mean, dude put up 220 scrimmage yards and 2 touchdowns. Insane game for him. Unfortunately, that meant Josh Allen didn't do all too much. Still luckily got into the end zone twice. But then Stephon Diggs did pretty much nothing. Gabe Davis did actually nothing. Dalton Kincaid did nothing. Khalil Shakir did nothing. It was all just James Cook.
Yeah, what's weird, Michelle, right? I mean, the Jaguars' run defense has been pretty solid. And then all of a sudden, it's been looking bad of late. The Cowboys were shutting down everybody. And we thought, okay, for sure, the Bills are going to have to put it up here. The Cowboys put up single coverage. There's going to be some opportunities downfield. No, they just kept running and running. And what's going on here? When the defense dominates, this is not good. Can we have 2 bad defenses on the field at the same time, please? Because when one team does this and they get into running mode and they pull away, we don't want blowouts in games like this. When you have Jaguars and Ravens, Cowboys and Bills, we expect it to go back and forth to the last possession. Not one team dominate and totally kill the other team's fantasy value. But the Bills killed their own fantasy value because James Cook was the only guy involved. Josh Allen didn't even have double-digit completion. Somehow he got 2 TDs, 1 rushing and 1 passing to Cook in this game. But it was weird, just to see the Bills. I mean, I don't know what this Bills team is. It's very unfamiliar to me. It's old school, like Willis McGahee or Marshawn Lynch or something like that, just pounding away with the running game and just not really throwing to a lot of great assets. But look, Michelle, we know reality plays a part in fantasy. And if they keep winning on the field, they're not going to change this. So it was pretty bad. Now, Dak Prescott, Michelle, people were riding this guy. He was awesome for the past several weeks. Then here come the fantasy football playoffs. I don't understand. I don't know why Dak just goes into the absolute tank, right? You think there was going to be garbage time? I didn't get it. It just seemed like he was lost out there. It's like the Cowboys seem to need to have a perfect matchup at home so he can crush it. If it's any weird conditions and weather or something and he's facing a decent defense, this is what happens. And now you're getting the Dolphins. Will be interesting because I think Tua and Dak are kind of the same way at this point.
Yeah, it is in Miami too. So at least for Tua, that might be okay. But yeah, it's interesting with Dak. I mean, he didn't just disappoint you. He destroyed you. If you ended up winning with Dak, congrats. We're talking about his next matchup, but if you had Dak Prescott as your starting quarterback, there's a really solid chance you lost unless you had one of the other guys that went off at another position. But you're disappointed with Pollard. Luckily, CeeDee Lamb had an okay game, 7 receptions, 53 yards, but he got the rushing touchdown, right? So you weren't too upset with him.
Yeah, it wasn't even a passing.
Jake Ferguson for a tight end, he did fine. 6 receptions, 44 yards. But yeah, Dak Prescott definitely killed you there. Or probably, if you have him, you probably don't have to trust him next week. He's probably out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just brutal. That's all I can say. It was just pretty bad here. So I don't know. The Cowboys, I don't know. That's why it's so hard to trust them, right? Not just in fantasy, but in general. When they have such a good team, are they going to make a run? And you see a clunker like this, and you can't feel good about them at all. So we'll get into some more clunkers as well, unfortunately, and then some really disappointing injuries as well in our final segment.
Yeah, before we do that, let's talk about another one of our sponsors. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. That means if you trust the Eagles or the Seahawks to win tonight on Monday Night Football, you can place a $5 bet on one of their money lines, and if they win, you can get $150 in bonus bets. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options available, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. To get in on the action, all you got to do is sign up by visiting fanduel.com/locked-on. Again, that's just fanduel.com/locked-on, and enjoy the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, Vinny, I think Sam Howell and the Commanders done so for this year. And Jacoby Brissett, replaces Sam Howell towards the end of that game. He comes in and makes Terry McLaurin go off. Guys, don't worry. I lost my fantasy playoffs by 2 points going up against Terry McLaurin. I hate Jacoby Brissett. Let's just say that right there. That was miserable. Thank you, Jacoby Brissett, for ruining my hopes and dreams. But yeah, it doesn't really matter because the next 2 weeks, the Commanders have to face the Jets at New York Jets and then the 49ers. So it's not like we are going to be pumped to play any of these players anyways, but I'm guessing it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. He looked much better when he came in, and maybe that allows you the chance to play Terry McLaurin because he was just throwing it up to him over and over and over again. And, Terry McLaurin got it done. Sam Howell, though, on the other hand, did not get it done.
Yeah, Michelle, I'm in a predicament here this week, and I actually was predicting this predicament, if that makes sense. I know Sam Howell was playing the Jets, so I was like prepared, and I had the bye week, so I'm glad I had the bye because I didn't have to play Sam Howell this week. So I've collected a myriad of options here other than Sam Howell. And I did this before this game, and now I feel even better about it, right? Because I'm not going to play him against the Jets. There's no way. And look, Ron Rivera said Howell's going to start again. I don't totally believe him. Come on. You already did it once. You can't go back there. One thing about Jacoby Brissett, if you look at last year, right? What did he do? He was an Amari Cooper friend, right? He goes to the number one receiver. He's not afraid. And like Sam Howell was, I'm going to get sacked. I'm going to get sacked. Let me throw it off to Curtis Samuel. Like that's what happened, right? The downfield passing game just disappeared, where Jacoby Brissett is a veteran. He's a big dude, right? He's not afraid to get hit. Hang in there, throw the longer passes. There you have Terry McLaurin show up. So we'll see. I mean, I don't like any of this stuff against the Jets this week because it's such a bad offense in general, and they'll get rocked up front. And I hate all of this against the Jets in this matchup. It's going to be one of the uglier games on the slate. But yeah, Howell let down. Look, I'm surprised this didn't happen earlier. Like he's been smacked around. I don't know why they waited now to make this change. Look, he's had a good run, but he's just kind of like a chicken with his head cut off, right? He just runs around, make plays, and it's kind of random. I think they need a little bit more.
Yeah, he needs more time to sit and learn. Or I think he has a lot of great skills, but the holding onto the ball, not getting it out, it's not working for him. I can't believe he stayed healthy all year long.
That is the biggest upset of the season when everybody's falling like flies here. That Sam Howell's made every start, but maybe not this week with Brissett. So
yeah.
I don't know.
And then can we talk about the Titans offense? Because the Titans, I mean, I mentioned this, right? Before this last week, the Titans are so unpredictable. Now, I was higher on Hopkins and higher on Henry because I figured it was going to be a close game against the Texans, and it was, right? It was a very close game. But Derrick Henry ends with 9 rushing yards on 16 carries, right? And then doesn't really do anything through the air to help that. And then DeAndre Hopkins has 2 receptions on 9 targets for 21 yards. So the volume was there for both of these guys, but the efficiency was terrible. Will Levis ends up spraining his ankle. We'll see if he's able to go next week or the rest of the season. But man, this offense is so annoying because Henry will go off for 2 touchdowns. Hopkins can go off for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns, or they do absolutely nothing. And I don't know how to predict it. Like, it just seems so random.
Yeah, what happens is, look, I think the Texans had a great game plan. I think they had like 7 sacks or something insane in this game, and they said, "Okay, they play that zone defense, right?" And usually DeAndre Hopkins is okay against that, but they didn't have Will Anderson Jr. either in this game, so I don't know. The Titans, I think they're just too limited, right? When you just have the couple things that everyone knows you're going to do: hand the ball to Derrick Henry and throw to DeAndre Hopkins, and if those things work, you're in business. If you're ahead in the game, you're fine. But I don't know. Like, I would get an electron microscope out there to see how many yards Derrick Henry had. It was pretty bad. I mean, I don't know how you
It
get
seemed
that
like the Texans came into this
volume.
matchup determined to shut down Derrick Henry
Yeah.
because of how much he's gone off on them in the past. It seems like they made it a primary focus in practice this week and going into this game. Like, no matter what, Derrick Henry is not going to do anything against us.
And everyone was like, okay, Derrick Henry's done this in X many games against the Texans, but has he faced a Texans defense with D'Amico Ryans coaching it? And like, stop with this past stuff. I don't want to hear it. You know, like, you have a history, but you're also younger back. You get a little bit older. You got to look at the Derrick Henry of 2023 against the Texans defense of 2023. So, yeah, I mean, don't ride all these in the last 5 games against this team. If they're different, then it's not the same team.
It did work for Derrick Henry, though, for like the last 3 years.
Yeah.
You know, like if
Yeah,
you
it
use
was
those
okay.
stats over the last 3
It
years,
was
it kept
okay, but
working.
the Texans are terrible. I mean, now the Texans are actually a good team, right? And that's a big difference,
Sometimes.
right? Yeah. They're getting better each week. Now, one team that I do not get, Michelle, and I can't even get myself to talk about this team anymore. We've dumped so much on Arthur Smith. You like to dump on Kyle Pitts. I'm going to start dumping on Bijan in this game. Look, I have to say this about Bijan. It was rainy. It was cold. I live down here in Charlotte. It was terrible. No one wanted to go to that game and be outside in the elements. It was a terrible day. All these fans went there. You thought, okay, great running environment, right? But I guess if you're into horse racing, Michelle, I guess Tyler Algier is the mutter, and they had to put on the mutter because Bijan apparently can't play in bad conditions or something. I don't get it. So Bijan should say, I want the ball, command the ball.
Yeah, it's not like Algier was doing anything at all.
I mean, yeah, he wasn't doing anything, but I mean, he was effective when he was out there, but where's Bijan? Like, get him out there. Like, I think this could be some on Bijan, right? Like, I think he has pulled himself on a little bit. I think he's got a little bit more of those qualities of like being a little bit protective of himself, where I think Jahmyr Gibbs runs with a little bit more violence and explosion, right? And that's the difference.
They're very different players,
they're different players.
Also, I do find that, like Bijan got a lot of carries to start the game. Cool. It takes, how many times do we see the running game not do much of anything until you start to wear down the defense? I mean, it's so much easier to run on a team in the second half than it is in the first. When you get the defense tired and you get them going, but it's as soon as Bijan has a couple stops out, no, Tyler Algier, you go in for your 2.5 yards per carry that we know you're going to get no matter how tired the defense is. Like, they always ride it out with Algier at the end. And it's like, well, that's when running backs can start to destroy the other team. I hate Arthur Smith has to be fired after this year, but
I just don't understand also, like, this game plan worked, right? We were like, he teased us so much with this last week, right? Oh, we finally learned that. Oh, but that was in Atlanta. Okay.
But I also told you they lost. So he was going to go against it. He was like, you know what? I used all my players. They did good, but we lost. So that means that this doesn't work.
He has no
Arthur
logic
Smith's
whatsoever.
brain. Yeah.
I don't know how you can have, like, look at the game plan and go in and say, look, we don't want to run like nuts on the Panthers, right? That's what you do. But then, I don't know, like, it seems like Desmond Ridder and this entire offense just goes into, like, zombie mode when they go on the road. Like, it's okay. You can play football outdoors, guys. It's okay. You can leave Atlanta and try to play your game plan. So I'm tired of these teams and coaches that do not travel well. Like, I want more Rams, right, in this league where they're playing a dome outside, weather, good defense, bad defense. They're going to come through with their game plan and execute. unfortunately, there's not many McVays, and Arthur Smith certainly is not a McVay. So, all right, Michelle, let's move on to more sad news. We're learning about more injuries here. Keaton Mitchell, we said, is out for the season, but look, two key injuries, actually three, that we're tracking, and new ones, I would say. Jamar Chase with a shoulder injury, he's considered day-to-day. Michael Pittman had that concussion, and Jaden Reed popped up with a toe injury. So these are some key players on top of, we'll see about Tyreek Hill and Chris Olave, who surprisingly missed their games with ankle injuries.
Yeah, and you're even forgetting about Zach Moss. He gets into the end zone early in the game, has the arm injury, doesn't come back, and he would have, I mean, he already had 10 fantasy points at that point. He would have absolutely destroyed the Steelers because they were running all over them, especially as that defense got tired. Moss would have put up the 25 plus points in that game. I'm so irritated because I obviously roster him everywhere. So that killed me. Keep an eye on that, but maybe Jonathan Taylor will be back next week. Both running backs to keep an eye on. If not, what's the backup's name? Goodwin or good?
Well,
something.
they had a lot of guys in there. Goodson and Sermon, but Jonathan Taylor could be back to clean up this entire mess this week. It could be the end of Zach Moss's fantasy relevance here in 2023.
Well, I'm guessing his arm has to be super hurt if he didn't come back in. I mean, it's an arm injury. He was out the rest of the game. What's happening?
Yeah, I want to see Jonathan Taylor this week, and I think there's a good chance you'll see him in there. Oh, guess who they play, Michelle? It is the Falcons. So that's going to be a fun game if there's these injuries that keep some of these guys out. So I don't know. At least it's at home. So then the Falcons won't turn into a pumpkin and disappear. But
maybe Drake wanted to get some targets.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't get it. It's like the light goes on at home and then we just turn it off and we're just disappearing. But we'll have to deal with Arthur Smith at least for one more game. I don't know if it's going to be 3 more games, but it's brutal. Trevor Lawrence, I think this is a concern because he didn't look all that great against the Ravens. The Ravens are a tough matchup, but he had the concussion coming out of it with the protocol. So I am a little concerned about the Ravens offense in general, right? They're playing the Buccaneers, and this is a good matchup, right? If they can get their passing game assets with the right quarterback. But if it's CJ Beathard, I think you're blowing it here. So I don't know. We're going to watch all these injuries for sure. And I look again with the Sam Howell situation, all this looks like we're going to have to find some streaming help at a lot of positions here. And we'll have that waiver wire for you on Tuesday's show.
Yeah, we'll dig into all of that tomorrow. It should be fun.
Yeah. And I don't want to talk about the Falcons anymore. I guess
me neither.
All right. Well, this has been your Monday edition of Locked On Fantasy Football, reacting to all the Week 15 fun, as we call it here, coming out of the games. Now, we still have one more game, the Eagles and Seahawks. A lot of fantasy matchups in the balance there, but we'll come back with a waiver wire. We'll do a running back and quarterback rankings here, and then look at wide receiver tight end rankings, close with our deep sleepers, flex plays, and price picks. So that's how we do it here on Locked On Fantasy Football all week long. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer.
And I'm Michelle Magdziuk. Bye, y'all.